If we look at the phosphorus management tool, to take an example of a regulatory solution that's now moving into a legislative solution, we need to look at, again, the facts of where we are with pollution. Agriculture, the leading source of bay pollution. 50% of Maryland's phosphorus problem is coming from agriculture. About half of Maryland farms have excess levels of phosphorus that comes from manure. Those are pretty clear and compelling facts that point to the need for a solution. I think there are a lot of farmers that are doing the right thing. I think there are also situations where farms have been getting manure year after year, and the new science is telling us that that is not a sustainable practice. Part of what the science is telling us about phosphorus is relatively new. Maybe the old science had said, our understanding of phosphorus is that it essentially stays attached to soil particles. And so, if we apply manure to farm fields, we're okay. It's not going to leach off out into rivers and streams. It's not going to leach into groundwater. It's going to stay where the soil stays. And science is an evolving thing. More information comes out, more research is done. Lo and behold, phosphorus is more mobile than we think. And now we have conditions where the Choptank River is one of the few in the entire Chesapeake Bay watershed that is actually going backwards in terms of phosphorus pollution. We're seeing more phosphorus in the Choptank while other rivers are seeing. It's important to take a look at what the phosphorus tool is and how it works. The phosphorus management tool looks at phosphorus and really at a field scale tries to understand what is the risk of that phosphorus moving off the farm field. So it looks at things like slope, it looks at things like soil type, proximity to surface waters, how much phosphorus exists in the soil on that field, and gives an assessment for what is the risk of the phosphorus leaving the field. Is it low? Is it medium? Is it high? Is it excessive? And if it's excessive, the legislation that's being proposed would require that phosphorus not be applied on that field anymore in the form of manure or any other source. So, is that burdensome for some farms that have low risk of phosphorus moving off the farm field? That's going to have virtually no impact on the farmer. For farmers that do have excessive levels, there is some cost to dealing with the fact that no manure can be applied there. And that's why we fully support things like financial cost share programs that help farmers deal with the burden of dealing with that excess manure. Things like transporting that manure off the farm to fields that have low phosphorus levels. Queen Anne's County, for example, has virtually little chicken production and has very low risk of phosphorus runoff, so those farmers won't be affected. The other ways of dealing with the cost, we think the big agriculture industries do need to play a role in taking some responsibility for helping share the cost that poultry farmers are under to deal with the excess manure problem. So there are some costs with it. CBF is supportive of the proposed legislation that calls for a 6-year phase-in of the legislation. No changes would be required until 2017. Full implementation would not come until 2021. We recognize that change is difficult, and the proposed legislation respects that fact and is responsive to the need to slowly phase in the program and allow change to occur in order to be responsive to the needs of the Bay and the fact that we have very polluted waterways on the eastern shore. We have looked pretty closely at trading, and we do think there's a role for it. We actually have a pilot program running in Queen Anne's County right now, where we are looking at all of the sources of water pollution coming from Queen Anne's County, two local rivers and streams that drain to the Bay, and looking at the relative cost of cleaning up those various source sectors from wastewater, from polluted runoff, from stormwater, from agriculture. The science is clear on this. Pound per pound, agriculture is the most cost-effective source to clean up. And does it make sense for farms that are already meeting a pretty high level of performance in terms of pollution reduction? Should they be allowed to do more in exchange for stormwater practices that generally cost more to reduce that same pound of pollution? And that's the trading concept. And you know, when we look at the financial savings and recognize the idea that it's the same pound of pollution, no matter what source it comes from, the water body's not going to know the difference. Intellectually, it makes sense. Mechanically, in terms of getting a program off the ground like that, it's complicated. You need to verify that the pound is being reduced and a number of other factors. But we do think it has potential. I mean, we haven't had this level of interest and concern in water quality and water quality protection at the level that we've had it since I've been doing this work over the last 20 years. And, you know, that's a reason to celebrate. You know, we've had county commissioners, county councils, local government staff, city government, all of these folks and the constituents that they represent rolling up their sleeves and saying, here is my local responsibility to help protect and preserve the local waters that my constituents swim in, that they fish in, and okay, we're finally getting some cost estimates for what that's going to take to get it done. It's been sticker shock for a lot of folks. Other folks have taken it to mean that, boy, if it's estimated to be this level of cost now, the longer I wait, the more expensive it's going to be because the problem is going to continue to grow in magnitude. Others are saying, okay, well, that's the estimate. Let's get down to some real numbers about what it's really going to take. Right. Well, I mean, and that's the role of the Bay Foundation, is working with communities to try and, you know, scratch the surface of these estimates for bay restoration and really dig down into what is it really going to cost? Right. What are the practical, cost-effective solutions, you know, that aren't in the hundreds of millions of dollars? I think a lot of us agree that it probably isn't that much and may never be that much because we don't really know. What we know is that somebody has finally asked the question and they have come up with the best estimate that they could at the time. And we're taking that number and we're drilling down and saying, okay, are there specific projects and programs that we can put in place to drive that estimate down that are pound per pound the most cost-effective ways to get the job done? We're doing that in Talbot County right now. We're looking at the 370 miles of roadside ditch network and we're saying, boy, a lot of that water that lands in that ditch is coming from farm field, it's coming from the road itself, it's virtually untreated, it's entering our waterways. The science shows that a lot of the pollution problems are their worst the farther upstream that you go, so we know that the stuff coming off the land is a problem. Is there a way that we can put in a little wetland or a little grass waterway or something to filter the pollution in strategic locations that the ditch network provide, and really get us into a place for pound per pound? We'll put in these little projects. We're going to take a little bit of farmland out of production. The farmer is going to remain economically viable. It's not going to cost the county government a lot. We're going to get big gains for the Bay, and it's going to be a win-win all the way around. And that's what this Clean Water Blueprint is doing for us. It's allowing us the opportunity to really dig into these solutions and move them forward. And you know, that's why I have optimism about this, because local government really is finally taking a close look, giving us an opportunity to put these solutions forward. And Governor Hogan made clear that, you know, on the stump during his campaign that he was going to repeal or pull back the phosphorus management tool regulations, and he made good on that promise. And the response by the Maryland General Assembly was, we've been doing the science for 10 years. We know that there are major pollution problems in the Bay. We need to stop the problem associated with excess phosphorus from manure, and we're going to move forward with the regulations legislatively. We'll see how that all pans out. The politics are very much swirling around this conversation, which tells me, you know, we're not done with the environment just because we've had an administration change. There's a lot of people that care about it. There's a lot of constituencies to be represented. The phosphorus management tool is very much being debated now on all sides about what is right. We may end up with a regulatory solution that works for all sides. And I expect we'll get that. We were disappointed that we weren't able to get in touch with the administration in a way that we would have liked to, talk earnestly about the issues and talk about a solution. That still has remained to be a challenge, but we think as we move through this Maryland General Assembly and have the debate about the legislation that's been introduced that will implement the tool, that we'll end up in a good place. I think people misunderstand the Chesapeake Bay Foundation when we go to bat for people who care about clean water. And we do that strongly, and we do that with science as our guide, and we push hard in order to make sure that those science-based solutions succeed. It usually represents a change in ways of doing business. I think people generally find that change is difficult, and so you get accused of working for some specific, special interest, or only being in it for yourselves because you're, just out to make money or whatever. All of us, we have careers working in the nonprofit sector, and we're not making a lot of money. We're doing this because we think it's the right thing to do, and we're doing it because it's making a difference, and we think we are working on behalf of the resource. I'm an optimist about this work, and I don't know if you have to be or not. I happen to be one. I really enjoy working with people on these issues. I enjoy the politics. I enjoy the people in their different positions on things, and trying to find a pathway forward that can connect interests, and that's what excites me about it. So, I like that. People look at it and say, oh, well, the State of the Bay report came out. You're only making a couple upticks. Maybe it's the optimist in me that says, we've had a massive increase in population over the last several decades if you look over geologic time, yet the Bay's health is marginally improving. That's a success story. Yeah. So we're seeing improvements on the health. And you look over the trajectory of time, measured in decades or longer increments, we have really changed the way we perceive our relationship to the environment, and what our sense of responsibility is to the environment and the communities of people that it sustains. Yeah. And I think you see that in the way people organize themselves, around issues, who they elect for leaders, what the expectations they have of those leaders are, and to me that gives hope, because we wouldn't be here where we are today working with communities on the Eastern Shore and having a serious conversation about the costs and the practices and how we're going to get the job done if we didn't have that arc of history bringing us to this point where we're able to have the conversation. And even 10 years ago, before I started the foundation, this conversation wasn't happening at this level. Yeah. It was at the state and the federal level, and towns and counties just weren't there. Yeah. And now they're there. And that's what gives me hope, is we're here now, and we can move forward and succeed at this. Yeah.